Karen Martinez pressed her face against the glass, watching the excavators tear apart her neighbor's backyard. Where a pristine swimming pool had sparkled just yesterday, now only churned earth remained. Her manicured fingers trembled as she dialed 911. "I need to report a crime," she whispered, her voice sharp with vindication. "My neighbor just destroyed thousands of dollars of property overnight." But as the police cruiser pulled into the driveway, Karen had no idea she was about to discover the truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about the quiet man next door, and expose the secret that would destroy her own perfect life forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as Detective Sarah Chen stepped out of her patrol car, coffee still steaming in her hand. She'd been on the force for 12 years, and she'd learned to read people in the first 30 seconds. The woman standing on the perfectly manicured lawn, arms crossed and lips pursed in righteous indignation, was a type she knew well. "You're here about the destruction of property," Karen Martinez announced before Sarah could introduce herself. "I'm the one who called. Karen Martinez, 1247 Maple Street." She gestured toward the house next door with a dramatic flourish. "That man has completely lost his mind." Sarah followed Karen's pointing finger to see a modest 2-story home with a backyard that looked like a construction zone. 2 large excavators sat silent in the morning light, surrounded by mounds of dirt and debris. Where she assumed a pool had been, now only a gaping hole remained. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Chen. Can you walk me through what happened?" Karen's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of heavy machinery. Heavy machinery. On a Saturday morning. I looked out my window and saw that man." She pointed at the neighboring house, directing 2 excavators to tear apart his beautiful swimming pool. A pool that must have cost $30,000, minimum. "And you believe this constitutes a crime because it's not his pool." Karen's voice rose to a pitch that made Sarah wince. "This is a rental property. He's destroying the landlord's investment. It's vandalism, pure and simple." Sarah pulled out her notepad, though something about Karen's story already felt off. In her experience, people who destroyed property in fits of rage didn't typically hire professional excavation crews. "Have you spoken to your neighbor about this?" "I've tried." Karen's face flushed. "But Marcus Webb is difficult. He's been nothing but trouble since he moved in 6 months ago. Loud music, parties that go past 10 p.m., and now this. I've documented everything." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. "Look at this. His garbage cans were out past pickup time. And here, his grass was half an inch taller than HOA regulations." Sarah studied the photos, noting the timestamps and Karen's meticulous documentation. "Mrs. Martinez, when did you last speak directly with Mr. Webb?" "Last week. I knocked on his door to discuss the noise violation from his dinner party. And yes, I know it was only 8 p.m., but the HOA clearly states that gatherings should be considerate of neighbors. He was extremely rude, told me to mind my own business, and slammed the door in my face." Before Sarah could respond, the front door of the Webb house opened. A man in his 40s emerged, wearing work clothes and carrying a clipboard. He was tall and lean, with graying temples and the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of handling crises. "Detective?" Marcus Webb approached the property line but didn't cross it. "I saw the patrol car. Is there a problem?" Karen stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Marcus, I think you know exactly what the problem is. You can't just destroy other people's property because you're having some kind of breakdown." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Mrs. Martinez, I've explained this to you before. The pool removal was scheduled and approved." "Approved by whom?" Karen demanded. "Your poor landlord probably has no idea what you're doing to his investment." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling a folded paper from his clipboard, "I am the landlord. I bought this house 4 months ago." The color drained from Karen's face. That's impossible. This is a rental property. It's always been a rental property." Sarah stepped between them, sensing the tension escalating. "Mr. Webb, can you show me the documentation for the pool removal?" Marcus handed over the cheap papers. "Building permit, contractor licenses, and the deed to the property. The pool was damaged beyond repair after the storm last month. The foundation was cracked, and it was becoming a safety hazard." Sarah examined the documents while Karen sputtered protests. Everything appeared legitimate. The permits were properly filed, the contractors were licensed, and the property deed clearly showed Marcus Webb as the owner. There must be some mistake, Karen insisted. I've been keeping detailed records of all the rental properties on this street. This house has been a rental for 15 years. It was, Marcus confirmed. Until I bought it. Cash offer, closed in 30 days. Karen's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something Sarah recognized as genuine fear. But you can't just buy a house without notifying the neighbors. There are protocols, community standards to maintain. Actually, ma'am, property sales are public record, but there's no requirement to notify neighbors, Sarah said gently. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Martinez, I understand this is a surprise, but I've been completely within my rights. The pool was a liability, and I'm having it filled in so I can landscape the yard. Landscape? Karen's voice cracked. You're going to destroy the property. Values of the entire neighborhood. That pool was a selling point. It was beautiful. It was also leaking into the foundation and creating a mosquito breeding ground, Marcus replied. I'm sorry you're upset, but this is my property and I need to make it safe. Sarah closed her notepad. Mr. Webb, everything appears to be in order. Mrs. Martinez, I understand your concerns, but no crime has been committed here. Karen grabbed Sarah's arm. Wait, you can't just leave. What about the noise ordinances? The disruption to the neighborhood? The impact on property values? Those would be civil matters, ma'am. You'd need to contact the city about noise permits. But from what I can see, Mr. Webb has all the proper documentation. As Sarah walked back toward her patrol car, she could hear Karen's voice rising behind her. This isn't over, Marcus. You can't just move into a neighborhood and destroy everything. We've work to build here. There are standards. There are rules. Marcus's response was quiet but firm. Mrs. Martinez, I've followed every rule and regulation. I've been respectful and considerate. But I will not be bullied into making decisions about my own property based on your preferences. Sarah paused at her car door, watching the interaction. She'd seen plenty of neighbor disputes, but something about Karen's reaction seemed disproportionate. The woman was practically vibrating with rage, her perfectly composed exterior cracking to reveal something desperate underneath. You don't understand? Karen continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone. This neighborhood has a reputation. Property values, community standards, people move here because they know what to expect. We can't just let anyone come in and what? Marcus asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. And destroy everything we've built, Karen finished, but her words seemed to hang in the air with unspoken weight. Sarah started her engine, but instead of leaving, she pulled out her phone and ran a quick search on the property records. What she found made her frown. According to the database, Marcus Webb had indeed purchased the property 4 months ago, but the previous owner wasn't a rental company or investment firm. The previous owner was Karen Martinez. Sarah turned off the engine and got out of the car. Mr. Webb, Mrs. Martinez, I need to ask you both a few more questions. Karen's face went white. I need to get back inside. I have appointments. Mrs. Martinez, please stay. I'm looking at the property records here, and it shows that you were the previous owner of Mr. Webb's house. You sold it to him 4 months ago. The silence that followed was so profound that Sarah could hear the distant hum of the excavators cooling down. Marcus turned to stare at Karen, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching understanding. You sold me the house, he said slowly. You're the one who insisted on the cash offer. You're the one who wanted a quick closing. Karen's perfectly composed mask finally cracked completely. I didn't know you were going to live here. I thought you were an investor. I thought you'd rent it out or flip it and leave. You sold me a house with a damaged pool, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. You knew about the foundation issues. You knew about the leak. That's why you wanted to close so quickly. Sarah stepped forward, her detective instincts fully engaged now. Mrs. Martinez, did you disclose the pool damage to Mr. Webb during the sale? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I disclosed everything required by law. That's not what I asked, Sarah pressed. Did you tell him about the specific damage to the pool? Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through messages. I have all our correspondence right. Here, Mrs. Martinez, you told me the pool was in excellent condition and pool ready for summer enjoyment. Karen's shoulders sagged. I needed to sell quickly. There were financial circums. The Martinez house felt like a museum that morning. Every surface polished to perfection, every throw pillow positioned at precise angles, every family photo arranged to project an image of suburban success. Karen sat at her pristine kitchen island, staring at the legal documents spread before her, her hands trembling as she reached for her third cup of coffee. The fraud investigation had moved quickly. Detective Chen had been thorough, pulling email records, text messages, and inspection, reports that painted a damning picture of deliberate deception. The pool damage had been extensive. A crack in the foundation that had been slowly leaking for months, creating structural issues that would cost thousands to repair. Karen had known. The inspection report from her own contractor, dated 2 weeks before the sale, was explicit about the damage. But somehow, that report had never made it to Marcus Webb. The doorbell rang, and Karen's heart jumped. Through the frosted glass, she could see the silhouette of a man in a suit. She opened the door to find a process server with a manila envelope, Francine. Martinez? You're being served with a civil suit for fraud and misrepresentation. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, from across the street was watering her garden, but Karen caught her curious glance. The perfect facade was crumbling, and everyone would know soon enough. After the process server left, Karen called her attorney, the same man who'd handled her divorce 3 years ago. David Brennan had helped her navigate the financial disaster that had followed her ex-husband's bankruptcy, the crisis that had forced her to sell the rental property in the first place. Karen, I've reviewed the documents you sent. David's voice was grave over the phone. This is serious. The evidence shows clear intent to deceive. The pool inspection report, your emails claiming the pool was in excellent condition, the accelerated closing timeline, it all points to deliberate fraud. But I needed the money, Karen whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it less damaging. After Richard's business collapsed, I lost everything. The house was my only asset. I couldn't afford to fix the pool, and I couldn't afford to take a lower offer. I understand the financial pressure, but that doesn't change the legal reality. Mr. Webb has a strong case, and Detective Chen's investigation supports criminal charges. Karen hung up and walked to her living room window. Across the street, she could see Marcus Webb's backyard. The excavation was complete now, and landscaping crews were spreading fresh topsoil where the pool had been. Even from a distance, she could see it was going to be beautiful, a natural garden with native plants and stone pathways. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to hide the pool's problems, she'd sold the house to someone who would actually improve it. The phone rang. Again. This time it was her sister Rachel calling from Phoenix. Karen, I just got off the phone with Mom. She said you're in some kind of legal trouble. Karen had been dreading this conversation. Rachel had warned her about the rushed sale, had questioned why she was so desperate to close quickly. It's complicated, Rachel. Try me. Karen found herself telling the whole story. The pool damage, the financial desperation, the lies she'd told, and now the criminal investigation. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the line stretched. For a long moment, Karen, what were you thinking? I was thinking about survival, Karen snapped. I was thinking about keeping my house, maintaining my life. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. So you decided to make it someone else's problem? The accusation hit harder than Karen expected. I thought he was an investor. I thought he'd flip it or rent it out. I never imagined he'd actually live there and find out about the pool. That makes it worse, not better, Rachel said. You thought you could scam an investor because they wouldn't care about the house the way a homeowner would? Karen ended the call and sat in her perfect living room, surrounded by the life she'd fought so hard to maintain. Every piece of furniture, every decorative object, every carefully chosen paint color represented her attempt to create stability after her world had fallen apart. But now that stability felt like an illusion built on lies. That evening, Karen forced herself to attend the monthly HOA meeting. She'd been the association's secretary for 8 years, known for her meticulous attention to community standards and property maintenance. Tonight, she hoped to find some semblance of normalcy, some reminder of the respect she'd once commanded in the neighborhood. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building that served the development's social needs. Karen arrived early, as always, and began setting up the chairs and preparing the agenda. Other board members filtered in: Tom Harrison, the president, and Marie Voss, the treasurer. Karen, Tom approached her with obvious discomfort. "We need to talk about the situation with your neighbor." Karen's stomach dropped. "What situation?" "The fraud investigation." Marie received a call from Detective Chen asking about neighborhood tensions, property values, the kind of community we maintain here. Marie stepped forward, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Karen, we've been friends for years, but this reflects on all of us. The HOA can't be associated with fraud or deceptive practices." "I haven't been convicted of anything," Karen protested, but even as she said it, she knew how weak it sounded. "The investigation is public record," Tom continued, "and frankly, some of the other homeowners are concerned. They're asking questions about property disclosures, about whether there are other issues we should know about." Karen felt the room spinning slightly. "Are you asking me to resign?" "We're asking you to consider stepping back while this resolves itself," Marie said gently. "It's better for everyone, including you." Karen looked around the room that had been her second home for nearly a decade. The HOA had given her purpose, had made her feel important and valued. It had been her way of maintaining control when everything else in her life had spiraled. "I'll submit my resignation tonight," she said, quietly. As the other board members began to arrive for the meeting, Karen gathered her things and left through the back door. She couldn't face the questions, the sympathetic looks, the inevitable gossip that would follow. Walking home in the twilight, she saw Marcus Webb in his front yard, planting what looked like a small Japanese maple tree. He looked up as she passed, and for a moment their eyes met. She expected anger, maybe satisfaction at her downfall. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like pity. The next morning brought another unwelcome visitor. Detective Chen arrived with a warrant for Karen's financial records, part of the ongoing investigation into the property sale. "Mrs. Martinez, I need to examine your bank records, correspondence with contractors, and any documentation related to the pool maintenance over the past year," Chen explained. Karen led her to the home office where she kept meticulous files on everything: household bills, insurance documents, tax records. The organization that had once been a source of pride now felt like evidence of her obsessive need to control every aspect of her environment. "This is very thorough," Chen observed, flipping through folder after folder of perfectly organized documents. "I like to stay organized," Karen replied, though the words felt hollow. Chen pulled out the contractor's report on the pool damage, dated 6 months before the sale to Marcus. "You received this report in February, but you didn't disclose the damage to Mr. Webb until August. What happened during those 6 months?" Karen stared at the report, remembering the day she'd received it. The contractor had been blunt about the extent of the damage and the cost to repair it properly. She'd gotten 2 more opinions, hoping for better news, but they'd all been consistent. "I was hoping the problem would stabilize," she said finally. "Sometimes foundation issues settle on their own. But you knew it was getting worse. You have 3 follow-up reports showing increased leakage and structural damage." Karen nodded, unable to speak. The evidence was overwhelming, and she'd kept every piece of it in her perfectly organized files. "Mrs. Martinez, I have to ask, why didn't you just disclose the damage and negotiate a lower price? Mr. Webb seems like a reasonable person." The question hit at the heart of Karen's shame. "Because I couldn't afford to take less money. And because I was angry." "Angry at what?" Karen looked out the window at Marcus's house, where the landscaping was taking shape beautifully. "Angry at everything. At my ex-husband for destroying our finances. At having to sell my rental property. At losing control of my life. at having to depend on someone else's decision about whether my offer was good enough. So you decided to take control by deceiving the buyer? I decided to protect myself, Karen said, but even as she said it, she realized how selfish it sounded. That afternoon, Karen found herself standing in her backyard, looking over the fence at Marcus's transformation of the space. The pool area had been completely reimagined as a meditation garden, with curved pathways, native plants, and a small water feature that created a gentle, soothing sound. It was beautiful. More beautiful than the pool had ever been. Marcus appeared at his back door carrying a watering can. He noticed her watching and walked over to the fence. "It's lovely," Karen said, surprised by her own honesty. "Thank you," Marcus replied. "I'm sorry it caused so much trouble." Karen felt tears welling up. "I'm the one who caused the trouble. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for lying to you for Kali." 6 weeks later, Karen Martinez sat across from Marcus Webb at a small cafe downtown, a stack of legal documents between them. The mediation had taken 3 sessions, each one more difficult than the last, but they'd finally reached an agreement that avoided both criminal charges and financial ruin. "So we're clear on the terms," Marcus said, reviewing the settlement one final time. "You'll handle all the landscaping maintenance for my property for the next 2 years, including seasonal plantings and lawn care. In exchange, I'll drop the civil suit, and Detective Chen has agreed to recommend community service instead of prosecution." Karen nodded, her throat tight with emotion. 2 years of yard work seems like getting off easy. "It's not just yard work," Marcus corrected gently. "It's accountability. It's you taking responsibility for the damage you caused and making it right through your own labor." Karen had been dreading this conversation, but now that it was happening, she felt an unexpected sense of relief. The past month had been a nightmare, of legal consultations, sleepless nights, and growing isolation from her neighbors. But it had also forced her to confront truths about herself that she'd been avoiding for years. "There's something else," she said, pulling out a folder of her own. "I've been working with a financial counselor, and I want to show you something." Marcus looked surprised as Karen spread out a budget worksheet and debt consolidation plan. "After Richard's bankruptcy, I made some poor decisions," she continued. "I took on debt I couldn't afford, tried to maintain a lifestyle that was beyond my means, and when the pressure became too much, I chose the wrong solution." "You don't have to explain." "Yes, I do," Karen interrupted. "Not for legal reasons, but because I need to understand how I became someone who could lie to a neighbor and then call the police on them when they tried to fix the problem I created." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Over the past weeks, he'd seen Karen's perfect composure crack completely, revealing someone who was tired, scared, and deeply ashamed. But he'd also seen glimpses of the person she might have been before financial desperation and pride had twisted her into someone she didn't recognize. "The counselor helped me realize that I'd been trying to control everything around me because I felt so out of control inside," Karen continued. "The HOA meetings, the neighborhood standards, the documentation of every tiny violation, it was all about creating an illusion of order when my real life was falling apart. And now," Karen smiled ruefully, "now I'm unemployed, resigned from the HOA, and about to become your gardener. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm not lying to anyone about my situation." Marcus nodded slowly. "Karen, can I ask you something? What do you actually want to do? If you could start over, what would make you happy?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I've been so focused on maintaining what I had that I never thought about what I actually wanted." "Well, you've got 2 years to figure it out," Marcus said with a slight smile. "And I have to say, your organizational skills are pretty impressive. Have you ever considered event planning, property management, something that uses your attention to detail in a positive way?" Karen felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years: possibility. "I used to love planning parties before everything fell apart. I organized all the neighborhood gatherings, coordinated the holiday decorations, managed the community garden project. What happened to that?" "I got so caught up in enforcing rules that I forgot about building community," Karen admitted. "I became the person everyone avoided instead of the person they came to for help." Their conversation was interrupted by a Familiar voice. Karen, is that you? Karen looked up to see Sandra Walsh, her former neighbor from 2 streets over. Sandra had been one of Karen's closest friends before the divorce, but they'd drifted apart as Karen became increasingly isolated and difficult. Sandra, hi, Karen said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She was certain Sandra had heard about the fraud investigation. I heard about your troubles, Sandra said, but her voice was kind rather than judgmental. How are you holding up? Karen glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I'm trying to make things right. Marcus and I were just finalizing our settlement agreement. Sandra looked between them with surprise. You worked things out without going to court? We're trying a different approach, Marcus said. Karen's going to help me maintain the garden she helped create the need for. Sandra laughed, and after a moment, Karen found herself laughing too. It felt strange. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed about her own mistakes. Actually, Sandra continued, I'm glad I ran into you. The community center is looking for someone to coordinate their events program. It's part-time, but it might be a good fit for your skills. Karen felt her heart skip. I don't know if they'd want someone with my recent history. Everyone makes mistakes, Karen. What matters is what you do next. Sandra pulled out her phone. I'll send you the contact information. The director is my cousin, and she knows you're good at organizing things. After Sandra left, Karen stared at the business card information on her phone. Do you think she's right? That it's possible to start over? I think, Marcus said, gathering up the legal documents, that you've already started over. The question is what you're going to build this time. 3 months later, Karen was kneeling in Marcus's garden, carefully transplanting autumn chrysanthemums around the water feature. The meditation space had become even more beautiful as the seasons changed, and she'd discovered that she genuinely enjoyed the physical work of maintaining it. Her phone buzzed with a text from the community center. The Fall Harvest Festival she'd organized had been their most successful event in 5 years, and they were offering her a full-time position as program coordinator. Good news? Marcus asked, emerging from his house with 2 cups of coffee. The community center offered me a permanent job, Karen said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Full-time, with benefits. That's wonderful. You've put together some great events for them. Karen sat back on her heels, looking at the garden they'd created together. Marcus, can I ask you something? Why did you give me a second chance? You could have pressed charges, taken my house, ruined my life completely. Marcus was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee. My father made some bad financial decisions when I was young. Not fraud, but he got in over his head and made choices that hurt other people. I watched him spend years trying to make it right, and I learned that sometimes good people do terrible things when they're desperate. And you think I'm a good person? I think you're a person who made bad choices and is working hard to make better ones. That's more than a lot of people do. Karen felt tears prick her eyes. I destroyed your trust, lied to you, called the police on you, and you still gave me a chance to make it right. Trust can be rebuilt, Marcus said simply, but only if both people are willing to do the work. As autumn turned to winter, Karen's new life began to take shape. The community center job gave her purpose and financial stability, while the garden work provided physical exercise and quiet time for reflection. She'd started attending a support group for people recovering from financial trauma, where she'd learned that her experience wasn't unique. Many people had made desperate choices when faced with economic pressure, but most importantly, she'd begun to rebuild relationships with her neighbors. Sandra had become a close friend again, and other residents had started approaching her for help with their own events and projects. The reputation she'd destroyed through fraud and manipulation was slowly being replaced by one built on competence and genuine service. One snowy December afternoon, Karen was inside Marcus's house, helping him plan the holiday decorations for his garden. They'd become genuine friends over the months, bonded by their shared experience of conflict and resolution. I have something to tell you, Marcus said, looking slightly nervous. I've been offered a job in Seattle, a promotion I've been working toward for years. Karen felt her stomach drop. Congratulations, that's wonderful news. It means I'll be selling the house. Karen stared at him, processing the implications. Our agreement was for 2 years. I still owe you 18 months of garden maintenance. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out a folder, I've been thinking about that. I want to transfer our agreement to whoever buys the house, but I also want to give you something. He handed her a document that made her eyes widen. It was a business license application for Martinez Garden Design and Maintenance Services. I've been watching you work, Karen. You have a real talent for this. You understand plants, you have an eye for design, and you're incredibly reliable. I think you could build a real business around garden maintenance and landscape design. Karen stared at the papers, overwhelmed. Marcus, I can't accept this. You don't owe me anything. I'm not giving you anything, he said firmly. I'm offering you the chance to earn something. I'll be your first reference, and I'll recommend you to the new owners. But the business will succeed or fail based on your own work. Karen felt the tears she'd been holding back finally spill over. Why? After everything I put you through, why would you help me like this? Marcus smiled. Because 18 months ago, you were a person who had lost hope and made terrible choices because